Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This webinar is part of the Unpacking Coaching webinar series presented by the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. My name is Sarah Payton. I am Communications and Marketing Officer with NCPMI, and I will be your webinar host today. Today's topic is Power of Practice-Based Coaching in Supporting Early Educators' Use of the Pyramid Model. Now, just a little housekeeping before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website, challengingbehavior.org. During the webinar, you will have the opportunity to post questions or comments by typing into the Q&A box on your screen. We will address these questions during the question and answer portions of our presentation. Following the webinar, you will be receiving an email evaluation from us. Please make sure to fill it out. Your data is very important in making sure that we provide the best learning experience possible. With us today is Dr. Mary-Louise Hemmeter. Dr. Hemmeter is Professor of Special Education at Vanderbilt University. Her research focuses on the effective instruction, supporting social emotional development, addressing challenging behavior, and coaching teachers. Also with us today are our guest panelists, Dr. Kirsten Kinder of Vanderbilt University, Raquel Lima from the Clifton Early Learning Academy in Clifton, New Jersey, and Ashley Lofties of Metro Nashville Public Schools in Nashville, Tennessee. We will learn more about them later in our presentation. And now, without further ado, I will turn things over to Dr. Hemmeter. Welcome, Dr. Hemmeter.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, we are really excited that our first Unpacking Coaching webinar is about to happen. Thank you for joining us. We hope that this is the first of our quarterly webinar series about unpacking coaching. And when you provide feedback to us, we would welcome your suggestions for topics that we might cover in the future. So we have a really exciting webinar planned today. So for our plans for today are for me to spend about 15 minutes providing an overview of practice-based coaching and how it can be used to support the implementation of the pyramid model in classroom and home visiting settings. I'm going to try to do that rather quickly because we really want to save the majority of the time to hear from our panelists who have been out using practice-based coaching in early childhood settings for the last several years. So obviously, today we're here to talk about using practice-based coaching to support the implementation of the pyramid model practices. A key component of practice-based coaching is the identification of a set of practices that can be defined and observed and described reliably. And while our presentation today is going to focus on how to use the pyramid model, how to use practice-based coaching to support practices associated with the pyramid model, it's also a content-ready coaching model, meaning that it can also be used to support other sets of practices. So we've been doing research on practice-based coaching for the last 10 years or so. As it's been used to support implementation of the pyramid model, as well as other practices related to supporting children with disabilities. When we have used practice-based coaching in our research to support teachers to implement the pyramid model practices, we found that practice-based coaching, or PBC, as I'll refer to it, has been effective for supporting teachers to use the pyramid model practices with higher levels of fidelity. We've also found that when we coach teachers for a year using PBC, that they continue to use the practices the year following the year that they get support around the pyramid model practices. So not only does the coaching model work to support teachers to learn the practices, but they also continue to use the practices in the absence of coaching. We also find that when teachers implement the pyramid model with higher levels of fidelity, they also report improvements in children's social skills and improvements in children's problem behavior. And this happens for all children, including children with the most challenging behavior. We also know that fidelity matters. And what that means is that when teachers implement the pyramid model practices with higher levels of fidelity, we see better outcomes for children. Our goal of using practice-based coaching is based on this logic model, which is that if we want positive outcomes for children, we need teachers to be implementing practices with fidelity. And if we want teachers to implement practices with fidelity, we need to be using effective practices for supporting teachers' use of those practices. And that's where practice-based coaching comes in. Okay, so practice-based coaching involves a cyclical process for supporting teachers to use effective practices. And that process involves needs assessment, goal planning, action planning, focused observation, reflection, and feedback. And then those pieces all feed back into each other. What makes practice-based coaching different from other models is the focus on an identified set of practices, again, that are well articulated and defined, and the explicit use of feedback. So a key component of practice-based coaching is the delivery of both supportive and constructive feedback. And all of that happens in the context of a collaborative partnership. And of course, we say that practice-based coaching all begins here. It begins with that partnership. We were very intentional in talking about the development of a collaborative partnership as the context for practice-based coaching. We think that partnership recognizes the expertise of the teacher as well as the expertise of the coach. So the teacher brings to it expertise around his or her classroom or the children and families with which the teacher works. And of course, the coach brings expertise around the coaching model as well as the specific practices that we're coaching on. The other important part of practice-based coaching that relates to the collaborative partnership and is key to developing the partnership is teacher choice. So teacher choice is built into the practice-based coaching model in a number of ways. Teachers have choices about what they're going to work on first. Teachers have choices about what coaching strategies we're going to use. Teachers have choices about what coaches are going to deliver feedback on. So all of that choice is a way of helping to build the collaborative partnership. All right, I'm going to talk about each of the components that happen within the context of that partnership. And the first component is related to shared goals and action planning. So the practice-based coaching cycle begins with needs assessment, and needs assessment around the pyramid model involves the use of the teapot as well as some teacher implementation checklists. And the teacher and coach come together with those data. The coach comes with teapot data, the teacher comes with self-assessment data, and together they develop a roadmap for coaching. They identify the goals that they're going to work on. They identify the action steps they're going to work on. They determine who's going to do what in terms of getting ready for implementing the pyramid model practices. And most importantly, they determine how they're going to know when they've met the goal that they've set. This action plan becomes the roadmap for coaching in that it determines what the coach will observe when the coach comes out to observe, and it determines what the content of the coaching and debriefing will be after the observation. The next component is called focused observation, and it's called focused observation for a number of reasons, but primarily because When a coach goes out to observe a teacher or a home visitor, it's focused on the action plan goal and the steps of the action plan that the teacher and coach have developed together. It's also called a focused observation because the coach is using a variety of strategies during that observation. In addition to observing and collecting data about the teacher's practice or the home visitor's practice, the coach might also do things like model for the teacher. The coach might prompt the teacher or home visit to use a specific strategy. There's a variety of strategies that the coach might use, and what's important to this model is that the coach and the teacher or the home visitor determine which of these strategies will be used during their debriefing meeting. So when the coach comes to do the observation, the teacher is fully informed about what the coach will be doing and what she or he can expect from the coach during that observation. The final component of practice-based coaching is reflection and feedback. Reflection involves both the teacher and coach reflecting on what happened during the observation. And of course, that reflection is once again focused on the steps of the action plan that they've developed together. The coach also delivers both supportive and constructive feedback, with supportive feedback being giving the teacher example or home visitors examples of practices that they've done well, and constructive feedback involving suggesting new ways of doing things or ways to use the strategy with different kids, in different contexts, or with differing intensities. The other important part of the reflection and feedback meeting is to plan the next observation and to reflect on progress towards action steps and action plan goals, and to plan for subsequent observation and debriefing sessions. When we've done research on the pyramid model, we have asked teachers to reflect on the coaching process. And while the teachers primarily say really nice things about coaching and say that coaching was effective, coaching was both in terms of changing their behavior, but also in how it impacts children. They also talk about how implementing the pyramid model can be overwhelming at times, that the pyramid model has a lot of strategies and it's sometimes hard to know where to begin. And their coaches have been really instrumental in helping them both figure out where to begin, figure out how to move through the pyramid model practices, and ultimately teachers report that their coaches were essential to their implementation of the pyramid model practices. So at this point, we're going to turn to our panel and let them tell you a little bit about their experiences with coaching. Before we do that, I'm going to pause to see if there are any questions.
There are no questions at this point in time, Amel.
Okay, perfect. We'll keep moving. All right, this is, to me, the really exciting part of this webinar. We have 3 really talented panelists. And I'm going to ask each of them to start by telling you a little bit about themselves and how they've been involved in practice-based coaching and the pyramid model. So Kirsten, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you. So my name's Kirsten Kinder, and I'm a research associate at Vanderbilt University. And I was first introduced to the pyramid model and practice-based coaching through my doc work and all the research studies that went along with it as we were developing practice-based coaching. And after that, I left the higher ed world and went out into the field and started using those things that I had learned about through research, and really gained a wealth of knowledge about implementation and practices. And my role as a coach at the early childhood learning centers in Metro Nashville Public Schools was so valuable to just give myself a richer understanding of practice-based coaching and what it can really do in empowering teachers and putting the pyramid model into place. So I'm really excited to be back at Vanderbilt now, and I'm in a new role supporting coaches. So at the a little bit higher level of supporting coaches as they implement the practice-based coaching model. So I'm excited to be here and to share some of these experiences with you today.
Hey, Raquel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Raquel Lima, and I am a pyramid model coach and intervention and referral specialist at the Clifton Early Learner Academy in Clifton, New Jersey. Our pre-K program serves about 240 4-year-olds. We currently have 16 classes, and I've had the opportunity to coach and to work with all 16 of our teachers, specifically around pyramid model practices. I was first introduced to the pyramid model and practice-based coaching during our program's involvement in the Pyramid Equity Project, which started in the fall of 2016. Through the project, I participated in coaching calls and received direct support from the Pyramid Equity Project team from the University of South Florida. Our program received support monthly for a period of 2 years. So I've used what I learned about practice-based coaching from our support team in my own practice and as a classroom coach. Although our time working with Pyramid Equity Project is coming to an end, I'm excited to continue coaching teachers using practice-based coaching around pyramid model practices. We've seen what a tremendous positive effect the pyramid model has had on our entire program, both our students and our teachers. And I'm looking forward to be able to share with you some of my coaching experiences today.
Thank you, Raquel. Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Lofties, and I'm the school counselor at Cambridge Early Learning Center with Metro Nashville Public Schools. I had social emotional learning, the pyramid model, the pyramid equity project work at our school, which Raquel has already briefly explained. Her school and my school were 2 schools in the nation that were lucky enough to get to participate in this the last couple years. So at our school, we will serve 140 4-year-olds enrolled in pre-K next year. We have a really large immigrant population at our school. Our students come from all over the world and speak multiple languages. I was first exposed to and trained in implementing the pyramid model back in 2007, I believe, when I was working as a Head Start mental health consultant in Denver, and I've just been trying to immerse myself in it ever since.
Thank you. So as y'all can see, we have really good we have panelists with really great experience, and I'm really excited for them to share more with you. So we're going to start by I'm going to start by asking Raquel to describe a positive experience you've had coaching teachers to use the pyramid model practices.
Okay, thank you. I had a teacher who was new to teaching preschool. She had started in October with a class of students that started in September with a different teacher. So needless to say, there were challenges right from the start. There were also several children in that class that demonstrated challenging behavior. So to begin coaching the teacher, I stressed first and foremost that the observations were non-evaluative and were for coaching purposes only. And then I started, as the cycle starts, with a teapot observation. I can tell the teacher was nervous, but she was eager to learn. So during the debrief, I started by pointing out parts of her practice that were already aligned with teapot and pyramid model practices. I could see that initially she didn't feel confident in herself and her teaching ability. So I really wanted to start by building her confidence and before asking her to reflect on what she would like support in. So I gave some supportive feedback before asking her to reflect on the observation and asking her, what were her goals for coaching for the first cycle. So as we continued our debrief, she had identified 2 action planning goals. The first goal was around teaching behavior expectations, and the second goal was around providing directions. So I asked her to choose one goal to start, and she immediately said teaching behavior expectations. So I provided her with examples of classroom behavior expectations and classroom rules. And then we worked together on developing positively stated rules specific for her classroom, which included a visual. We discussed when she planned on teaching them and how she was going to review them with the class. The teacher also wanted to make area-specific rules, so we worked together on doing that as well. Once the rules were created, the teacher got right to work on modeling and using those rules in her classroom with her students. We planned a focus observation so I could come back in, and I can see that she was really trying to teach those behavior expectations for her students. However, like I said before, she had a difficult class, so I can see that she was still struggling with them. But we kept on through the cycle, and throughout that whole first year, I would share both supported feedback and constructive feedback to highlight her practice and to offer ideas. She took the initiative and she implemented the things that we had discussed. But after a difficult first year, there was a chance that she might not be rehired. However, in fact, she was rehired, and the real success in this story is how in that second year, she took everything that we worked on in that first year and put it into practice in her class on that very first day of school. I was blown away by my first visit to her classroom. It was unbelievable. It was early in the year, but I could see that she effectively taught her students behavior expectations, problem-solving skills, and friendship skills really early on. So this teacher is now regarded as a highly effective teacher. She's a true asset to our program. Her confidence has grown, and she is able to consistently implement TPROP practices to fidelity. Coaching worked in this case because it was truly collaborative, and even though there were challenges, both parties, teacher and coach, kept returning to the cycle of goal setting, action planning, returning for focused observations, and consistently sharing feedback about teaching practices. I was very excited about that.
I love that story, and that's what our research shows, but it's also so refreshing to hear a kind of firsthand story about how that happened. Kirsten, do you want to share a positive experience you've had coaching?
Definitely. So I've had many, but one really sticks out in my head, and it was a teacher, and she had been teaching for a while, but she came to the training just so excited because she knew that one of her weaknesses in her eyes was classroom management. And so she had heard that the pyramid model was going to help with this. And I could just see it when the challenging behavior came up in her classroom, her confidence just plummeted. And this was a teacher who had a lot of strengths. And she was strong in child development. Her environment was wonderful. She had great positive interactions with the children, but she just lacked that confidence, lacked those systems in place to really be able to stand on and understand how to prevent these challenging behaviors. So right from the beginning, she knew what she wanted to put into place. She had the choice, kind of how Raquel was saying too, that power of choice to put into place some practices. And what really helped and made a huge difference was having that action plan. So she picked a goal, but we really broke it down and we said, okay, so how are we going to get this in place? We know what we want to get in place. How are we going to do it? How are we going to break these steps down? And that was an important component of the action plan. But for her, it was pulling it back out and saying, look how far you've come. Look how much we've accomplished already. You are really growing. So the times when her confidence kind of took a step back, we could use that action plan kind of as evidence of her hard work and what she's had in place. And I really think more than me just saying, oh, you can do it and you're a great teacher, we had the proof. We had the action plan and those practices were in place. And what was so great was that I got to be her coach the following year as well. And she was setting up her classroom that beginning of second year, and she just said, I'm so much less stressed because I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be able to handle whoever comes in my classroom. I don't have this growing fear. And like I said before, that confidence, it wasn't just me saying you could do it. It was her seeing that she had done it through that action plan and having a way to get there. So that's really one of my biggest success stories that always her success story that always sticks out in my mind when I think about positive experiences.
Thank you. And I love how both of your all's examples really demonstrated the importance of the PBC coaching cycle, from the goals y'all selected to the steps that y'all put on the action plan and the feedback and support you gave the teacher around that. Now, maybe one of the challenges in using PBC to support teachers are teachers who might be less open to coaching. So the story that Kirsten just told, that teacher sounded really ready and open to coaching. And it makes me think about, well, how do we coach teachers who might be a little bit more resistant? So Ashley, I think I'll start with you. How have you found PBC to be useful when coaching teachers who might be a little bit more resistant?
One thing I found really, really useful about PBC is that at the beginning of the coaching relationship is having that conversation about the role of the coach and the role of the teacher. So it's key that as a coach, you're there to support. You're not the person in the building who's doing the evaluation. You're not coming in with any of that on your plate. You're just there to support and see how you can better help that teacher to implement. Another thing that I really like about it is the collaboration agreement. So going over what are the coach's responsibilities, what the teacher's responsibilities are. It's something you both sign and commit to. And it's a great resource we use at our school to kind of go back if we need to look at that throughout the year. Another thing I like about it is how teachers are really empowered to be the ones to pick the goal that they're going to work on. And honestly, in the face of a teacher who's feeling not confident or feeling kind of resistant, I really encourage to have that teacher pick a goal that they feel a little bit confident about, something that they feel like they can achieve and work towards and accomplish. You can work your way up to those more daunting areas on the teapot that feel a little less comfortable, or maybe you feel like, oh my gosh, I didn't score very high on, but you want to start where you're at and build that confidence. I also wanted to mention the observations because there's twofold. So one thing is I feel the observations are really, really powerful because you're not just talking theoretically, but you're talking about what you see going on with your particular group of kids this year in the classroom. So it may look different depending on different groups of kids and what teachers are comfortable with and that kind of thing. I like that they're announced, they're pre-planned. It gives, I feel like it makes the teacher less stressed that way to know when you're coming in, what you're going to be looking for, what we're going to be talking about, and then talking about what are the little things that you saw go right, and not necessarily, oh, this was wrong, this is what we're going to work, we need to fix this right now, but talk about, hey, I saw you tried this, this, and this. It was different than I saw last time, and that was really great. And talking about how you can add and tweak those practices to continue the growth that you're starting to see, however small it may be there. And then finally, I just wanted to mention about, I feel it's really, really powerful for teachers who are feeling kind of resistant, they're skeptical of the model, maybe they're not feeling confident, but for them to observe themselves, to be able to observe a peer. So saying, if to a teacher, hey, we've been talking about this goal for a while, and, I'm seeing X, Y, and Z in your classroom, but I'm also noting that Miss So-and-so has been working on this goal too, and I've been really blown away by the ideas that she had, and would you like me to come into the classroom during this time so you can go watch her, and maybe you guys can collaborate and come up with some things together. I feel like that peer-to-peer learning can be really empowering and really powerful for teachers.
Thank you, Ashley. So you said you said a lot of very important things, but I want to just highlight two things. One is this notion that when we're using practice-based coaching, we really are there to support the teacher. And we think it's really important to separate out the role of a coach from the role of a supervisor. So I think that is probably really key to supporting resistant teachers, really to supporting all teachers, but especially teachers who might be a little more resistant. And the other thing that I mentioned, but that you did a really nice job talking about, Ashley, was the idea that the observations are pre-planned. The there's no surprise in it. The teacher knows what you're coming to observe. The teacher in many ways dictates what you're going to observe when you come out. And so I think that creates a context that maybe is a bit safer than a lot of teachers might have experienced in the past.
Yes.
Okay, Kirsten, how about you? How have you used PBC to support teachers who might be resistant?
So one thing about practice-based coaching with resistant teachers is I had a teacher that wasn't really resistant to coaching, but was resistant to change. I don't think she really felt like her circle times were needed to be shortened, even though I was seeing some behaviors kind of come through. So we had to figure out a way to help her see that. And practice-based coaching, one of the strategies that's listed in a focused observation is data. So collecting data. So what I did was we talked a little bit about engagement, and she had mentioned, someone not paying attention. So I said, we could take some engagement data. That's something I could do for you. You can't do that while you're in leading circle, but I can have eyes on it. That's one of the benefits of having a coach in the classroom. And so I went through and did some data and would mark when a child was engaged or when that child wasn't. And then we paired it side by side with what was happening during her circles during that time. And I think something about laying it out and her seeing exactly how long the 40 minutes was and the way the child behaviors changed really made a difference. It wasn't me saying it. She could see based on the data that I had taken. And practice-based coaching encourages using data and using that as part of, again, not saying I'm going to come and take this secret data, but us planning it together and saying, hey, this could be a way to understand these things better. So that was one way that was for that teacher who was resistant. Practice-based coaching was really useful, and she made some changes. It was great.
And I think that using data also takes the subjectivity out of it. So it's less about what I think or you think and more about what the data really show us. So Raquel, how about you? How have you used PBC with teachers who might be a little more resistant?
I've seen practice-based coaching being useful even with teachers who are resistant. As Ashley said, it's always really important to stress with teachers that any observations and coaching conversations are confidential and totally non-evaluative and strictly for support. I think that's always a great way to start that coaching relationship. I also make it a point to share with all my colleagues that we're all working on something. I'm working on things. Teachers are working on things, students are working on things relative to their learning as well. So we're in a culture of learning. So that really helps as well. And then practice-based coaching, the teacher's in the driver's seat. It's up to them to decide what goal they want to work on. Especially with resistant teachers, but with all teachers, I start with supportive feedback first based on that TPOT observation. And then I share TPOT data. To get resistant teachers to start brainstorming goals, I find it effective to start by asking really open-ended questions. That gets them to start reflecting and talking about their classroom practices. So starting with the open-ended questions and then really keeping the conversation super focused around the data. And going back to, it's not what I think, this is what the tool is showing us. Always going back to the TPOT. And then once I can get a resistant teacher to start thinking about an action plan goal, I keep it to just one goal to start. I think selecting more than one goal is overwhelming, especially for someone who's resistant. And then once we have the goal in place, kind of sticking with the format of practice-based coaching, offering constructive feedback, as well as some resources for coaching and some of the examples that they can draw from. Another paramount, I think, in our program that I've seen, I work really closely with our master teacher and our principal. So we have our conversations, which teachers remain nameless, and it's really talking about program-wide implementation. So that becomes a support for me that's really helpful with working with teachers that are resistant.
Thank you. And that was masterful how you did that, even with your daughter popping in the screen. So, all right, we're going to move on to the last question we have prepared, and then we're going to try to get to a few of the questions that the participants have typed in. So, Ashley, how about you start with talking about, Raquel kind of alluded to this at the end of her remarks, which is to talk about what supports you think coaches need to be effective in supporting teachers.
All right. Well, I kind of broke it down. And one is probably a really basic and obvious one, but I think training is key. So of course, they need to be trained in the pyramid model. And of course, they need to be trained in the teapot. But I feel that just helps to make things more concrete and measurable for coaches. Coaches need data, which goes back to the teapot as well. So I think all of you have talked a little bit about it. It's not just my subjective idea or my subjective observation, but hey, this is what I'm seeing as far as your teapot data goes, or even maybe behavior incident report data, or as Kirsten mentioned, maybe taking some data on a specific kid who may be challenging, or the whole group at a time of day that might be challenging for everyone. But I feel like data really, again, goes back to making things concrete and measurable. And I think it kind of takes, how do I want to say this? It doesn't feel as personal to the teacher. It makes things more subjective and more like, hey, we're seeing X, Y, and Z, not you're doing this and you need to change it kind of thing. And then, of course, anecdotal data from your planned observations in the coaching cycle as well. I know one that's huge for coaches is time. So it's not something that coaches can always control, of course, because I know there are a million demands placed on coaches. They cannot get done everything that needs to get done in the day. But I feel like it's a key factor in partnership and success. And when administrators are really understanding and helping coaches to do the best they can with the very little amount of time they have, that is feels very supportive and makes you feel like maybe I can accomplish what I'm setting out to in this very short amount of time I have with my kids. Let's see. Planning those feedback sessions, I think, is really important too. When you plan the date and the time with the coach, it helps to get that feedback done in a timely manner. Of course, things come up. We work with small children, we work in schools, but you hope that you'll be able to do it in the time that you planned, or at least close to that, so that the feedback is meaningful if it's effective. The final thing I wanted to mention that I feel like is really crucial for coaches to have so they can be effective in supporting teachers is consultation. And of course, this is going to look unique in every building, every setting. So I've worked in buildings where, yay, I get to stay there all week long. And that's amazing in an ideal situation, but that doesn't happen a lot. Most coaches, you're traveling around. And as a counselor, as a mental health consultant, I was in the same boat. I don't remember how many schools I had at a time, typically, when I think back on years, but you do a lot of traveling. But I think it's crucial to have colleagues that you can consult with about the coaching experience. I know Kirsten already mentioned this a little bit, but I feel like that's key. They consult with before going into observations, going into action planning, going into feedback session with teachers. Oftentimes, one part of my job I really love is being able to consult with coaches in the building before they go in regarding specific action plans and come up with some ideas and strategies together so they feel prepared going into that with educators. That's it.
Thank you. I wish every coach had someone like you to support them, Ashley. But
Aww.
Okay. Kirsten, do you have anything you want to add?
I do. So I was thinking back, and one of the things that really helped me in the trenches was the community I built with other coaches. So what Ashley was saying kind of at the end with a consultation, kind of a place to go. So a community of other coaches who were doing similar things, who maybe have had similar struggles that I could bounce ideas off of, or just celebrate with and say, I heard 2 descriptive praises today. This was great, And so others who would understand what that really meant and how much work went into that. to see those things get into place. And so that community of coaches was just really important. And time for those coaches to collaborate, time to share ideas, because getting your own PD is important, like Ashley mentioned as well. And that can come from each other. That can come from, really focusing on a coach's needs assessment. What are some of these strategies for coaching that I want to put into place? And we can support each other in making that happen. And in that sense, you're really paralleling with the teachers that process of setting a goal for yourself as a coach and getting some feedback, maybe videotaping yourself sometimes, and looking back. Some of my greatest aha moments were watching myself sitting next to a teacher just not knowing what to say because I hadn't planned for that. And that was just very eye-opening. And I really recommend that for anyone who's out there in the field. Turn that video camera on yourself, and you'll model that, as Raquel had said earlier, this community of learners all together, this culture of we are always looking to learn something new and put new practices into place. So that community of coaches, I think, is one of the biggest importance.
Thank you, Kirsten. So Kirsten lets us use videotapes of her coaching to do training all over the country. And every time she watches them, she says she learns something new. So thank you. All right. I think at this point, we'll see what questions we have from the participants.
Our first question is from Karen Walker. Karen asks, when it comes to implementation, how is it to helping teachers understand the consistency piece, is essential? How do you deliver that message in hopes that it sticks when coaching is over?
So I am going to put Raquel on the spot here. I hope it's okay, Raquel, because you talked a little bit about a teacher who you did just that with. Do you want to talk about how you support teachers around being consistent?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. I think when we're talking about consistency, I always kind of frame things from a coach to a teacher and put it in terms teacher to student. We want the consistency for the kids. So if we're teaching very young children how to do things, we have to make sure that we do it consistently, repetitively, within a daily structure, within the daily routine every day, because that's how young children learn best. So always framing it in the way that that's what's going to make the students the most successful. And once we finish an action planning goal and move on to a new goal, we don't want to forget that goal. We don't want to put it away and say, okay, we did it, now let's move on to the next and forget what we've already done. So in focus observations, maybe just highlighting again, even if we're working on the next goal, going back and saying, well, I noticed you did this and that was our previous goal. See how that you're continuing to implement that in your classroom. So to highlight that for the teachers so that, again, they're growing the confidence, they're getting the practice, and they're realizing that they're still keeping that as part of the practice. And a lot of my teachers, the first year, it was, not necessarily a struggle, but we're all learning. And in that second year, I was able to see that they were really consistent in their practice because they saw that it worked.
Great. And I love the point, Raquel, that you made, and Kirsten, that you made around the parallel process. And I think if we can always be modeling for coaches, the parallel process of how we support coaches, coaches support teachers, and teachers support kids. So I love those examples. Okay, Sarah, do we have another question?
Yes, we do. We have a question from Stephanie Johnson. She has a two-part question. First, she asks, how long is each coaching reflection meeting? And then she also asks, how many times do coaches visit within a year?
So Kirsten, I'll throw this one to you to just give some, from your experience, maybe answer those questions.
Sure. I think that the first part was about how long the debriefing meeting was, right? Well, we would schedule a half an hour, knowing that some teachers would want to talk longer and could talk longer. And others we might only get 10 minutes. And I think that being flexible with the amount of time that we had. Teachers would often sometimes meet on their lunch if they wanted to. Again, we gave that choice as much as we possibly could, as far as when we'd meet during nap time or after school. But really what I found is that the time that we had didn't make, at least from my point of view, didn't always mean the most as far as amount, but what we did with it. So if we came in and I was prepared and that teacher, was familiar with the action plan and that was up front and center and we got at it, it didn't have to take a long time. There were other times that needed a little bit more conversation and we needed to kind of hash some things out and brainstorm. So those meetings took a little bit longer. So I don't think there's a magic number, but we usually looked at trying to get about a 30-minute meeting together, but 30 minutes of meeting time, of actual talking to each other. And then the other question was about how many sessions throughout the year. Again, practice-based coaching has a lot of different ways to be implemented. The cycle is the important piece that we're going through that process. In some places, we would meet about 16 sessions over the school year. In our research studies that we had done. Other times, programs I've been in, it's been more like once a month with maybe some check-ins or some emails in between. But that actual debriefing and observation was more infrequent. So does that?
Yeah, let me just add to that, which is, so I think there's what we know from research. So Kirsten's right. In our research studies, we tried to do 16 weeks of coaching, and we found that that on average was adequate for supporting teachers to implement the practices with higher levels of fidelity. So there's reality. So there's the research, and then there's reality. And I think one of the things that we'll explore on future webinars is how you determine how much support individual teachers need. And so I think part of the answer to that question is also about where teachers begin, and that there are some teachers who might need weekly coaching, and there are some teachers who probably, if we check in with them on a monthly basis, they're going to continue to improve. So it probably varies. All right, Sarah, do we have time for another question, or is it time to wrap up?
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
This question is from Lori Vallejo. She asked, are there specific data forms or are they coach made?
Ashley, I think I'm going to throw this one to you to share how y'all have done it.
Okay.
Not to put you on the spot, but.
Sure. I would say, and Kirsten, please step in, and Raquel as well with this question, but for us, a lot of them are coach-made data forms because I'm trying to really hone in on what the specific teacher or specific child or group of children, what we're looking at with them. However, there are, and I would ask Kirsten or Kirsten or Raquel to talk a little bit more about those, the pyramid forms that you can use.
I'll step in. I actually started using one type of form during my first year of coaching, and it was a T-chart that I made on Google Drive, and one was visitation notes and strategies for follow-up. I didn't find it to be that effective at all. So I went back to a pre-made form from Pyramid, and it was the focused observation example. It was that note sheet. So it had on the top the basic information, coach, teacher, date of observation, time, action planning, goal. And I liked that it had the goal right there. So if we were working on teaching behavior expectations, I knew when I was in the classroom for however long, I'm focusing on teaching behavior expectations. I'm not looking at a million things going on in the classroom. So it's actually keeping me focused. And then one side was what I observed, and the other side was what I'd like to share, which was great because I think that what I like to share is a really good spot to highlight using supportive feedback what the teacher's doing well. And the observation is not, it's not subjective, it's very objective. It's exactly what's being observed. And on the bottom, I believe it's steps or follow-up steps. And so that piece too doesn't have to be follow-up steps that I created. That piece we can go over the observation together and say, okay, what do you think are some follow-up steps based on this action planning goal and the observation? So I like that form better than mine.
Great. I think the answer is yes. We have some forms that, like Raquel said, that we'll figure out how to get people access to. But I think it also will vary depending on what the goal is you're working with on a teacher at any given time.
Thank you so much to our presenters and panelists for their wonderful insights and information on practice-based coaching. I would like to invite all of our attendees to visit our website, challengingbehavior.org. Here you can sign up for our upcoming webinars, as well as access of all of our recordings and our pyramid model resources. This concludes our presentation. We hope that you all have enjoyed our webinar. Now, please remember to provide feedback on our post-webinar evaluation, which will be coming to you via email. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.